In this section, we're going to be talking about the deployment of Ingress resources for our cluster. We've talked about planning IP addresses, and we're also taking a look at how the topology itself will come to be with hub and spokes. And this time, we need to look at how this will fit the picture with Ingress controllers. If I switch here to our diagram, what we have is a high-level overview of how this will work. So as traffic is initiated by outside users to the cluster, you can see traffic flowing from the internet, hitting the web application firewall. So we have our first layer of security there as well with our V2 SKU. Then after that, the next endpoint from the web application firewall is an internal load balancer, which is managed by AKS. That internal load balancer contains an IP address here, which is essentially internal to this subnet in the spokes, and it will route traffic to traffic. So not this traffic, but this traffic here that runs as a pod in one of the user node pools. It is a twofold architecture where you have this internal load balancer and traffic. One of the important concepts here is that if you have, let's say, to spin up a second or a different cluster in here, or even just swap the entire cluster out, what's interesting about this architecture is that the internal balancer stays in place. So as you bring a new cluster, you can then just reroute traffic to that new cluster. With what we have here, it is fundamental to understand that we are doing TLS communication, or receiving traffic from the application gateway. That communication is secure through TLS. Now, TLS termination will take place with this traffic here. So not to confuse just on the naming there. So from that point on, you really have HTTP inside of the cluster. There are a few things here that I want to bring to your attention. If we go back and take a look at the other things that we have here. A fundamental decision that needs to be made here is that you might probably want to allow the controller, so traffic in this case, to really interact only with the pods for a specific workload, and you can do that. The other thing that we want to be mindful is that we really don't want to have a lot of replicas for the controller on the same node. That wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So you want to be able to spread that out and ensure that if, let's say, one node fails, that the other one can pick it up. And you can do that with something like pod anti-affinity, where you don't allow two of these pods to run on the same node. You can also have pods to be scheduled on a specific node pool. So we're doing this on a specific user node pool. You can use a node selector for that. That's also a way for you to achieve this, or a combination of pod anti-affinity with node selectors. In the architecture that we have here, traffic will only receive traffic from the Azure application firewall. So to make this a little bit easier here, just again because of all the naming, what I mean by that is this traffic here will only receive data, so network flow, from the web application firewall. So that's a key important thing here, especially if we're trying to troubleshoot this. Other things that you might want to consider here is to have a restriction, and we do have this in the implementation of this architecture. Restrict what traffic, again, this traffic here, what traffic can and cannot do. So you can apply Kubernetes RBAC permissions to that. In our case here, a few verbs that were allowed for traffic were watch, get, and list for services and endpoints. And you can do this with a cluster role object. So the implementation of this with traffic is shown in here, where we're using annotations, and you can see TLS and entry points are in there. So take a look at this, and that will indicate where the traffic will flow. So if you haven't worked with this before, it might seem a little intimidating, but go with the example that we have here. And because traffic does TLS termination, you can see some of that information in this example here. So what I'd suggest is, I'm just gonna kind of show here what we're meaning here. The things to take in mind here will be under annotation. You can see some of the information in here, and then do pay attention on some of the things like the fact that we've enabled termination of TLS here to be true. So spend some time, take a look at this, take a look at the rules and the routes that we have in there as well. This is also found under our, this is all under our documentation, which by now we probably all know by heart. But if you're new to this, or if you're just watching this video, this is where we're going here. That's our baseline documentation. I'll leave the link to this here below.